Hello, my name is Tali, and this is a project I'm doing with Iran that you heard before. As a planner, I'm interested, of course, in what's happening in the day-to-day life. So my presentation is less about questions of data collection, but rather how we, the users, perceive this during our daily activities. I will be very, very brief. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of smart city. Do you? Okay. So I won't have to say a lot, but today many private companies like Hitachi, Cisco, IBM are developing the idea of smart cities, and generally planners are working under the assumption that over the last decades we are facing demographic growth, migration movement, and rapid expansions of cities, which intensify social polarization, crime, and violence. And this assumption, and in response to these ideas, cities are using technological tools as a means to monitor and control public spaces, aiming as a whole to reduce fear and anxiety among inhabitants. This is the justifications. And a safe city, the idea city without violence is a project that is being implemented here in Israel, or smart cities are all in many ways are all a similar name to the same thing, which means collecting as much data as we can to propose a sort of protecting people in urban spaces through various means. And of course, our question as planners, and also in collaboration with Iran, is what are the implications of this project on the future of public space? I mean, can we actually define or say that we have public space? I mean, in urban studies, public space means anonymity, means meeting with strangers, but if it's constantly being surveyed or monitored, is it public at all, or is it just a form of private space? And here I think that we disagree about the definition of public-private today. So the question for me and for Iran is actually, can we challenge this paradigm of control, or maybe it's too late? Of course, you are familiar with this kind of geoinformatics maps, and I brought you two additional images. This is from IBM, and the left is from Hitachi, and this is kind of diagrams that illustrate the way or what kind of data they are collecting. This is I don't know if you see it, but they have this kind of it's also, well, you can see here turning big data into insight, and this is the data center. It just illustrate what kind of data is being collected on each of us in the cities. I have to say that in Israel it's not familiar. I mean, I don't think it's in the press, but Cisco is actually doing a large project in a huge scale all over Israel. It's going, and it's also hosted and pushed by the government and personally by Benjamin Netanyahu. So this is not something that is far, it is actually here. Though one of the famous projects, I don't know if you're familiar, are you familiar with Songdo in South Korea? So I really urge you to look for it. It's the first smart city that was actually built from scratch. Songdo, and it's not a surprise. This is a project conducted by Cisco, also with collaboration with other companies, and it's not surprised that it was the first project of smart city, holistic smart city in Korea, but there are also other projects like that in different parts of the world. Not so much in the West that maybe the public may object to it. But our suggestion in this project is to see control as a complex idea, not just fostered vertically, top-down surveillance through this project or through data smart centers, but also horizontally. What we try to say is that we actually cooperate with it daily, all the time, through individual social network. It's not that we actually, and that's why I was asking you, what's the role of the public? I think that the public is passive, and actually is collaborating with it constantly. So our argument is that the vertical horizontal control paradigm, in the name of public safety or in the name of democracy, is actually contributing to the sense of being exposed constantly in public space, and we're all collaborating with this. We did a study, Eran, you can also explain this, but we did a study using a mixture of research methods. We actually had 51 participants in this study. What we did is interviews before and after about the meaning of public space and private space and lots of different questions. But also what we did is an observational user study that was based on smart spaces. We implemented it on their smartphone, personal smartphone, and what we did is actually something very spooky. We tracked all their activities, including location of the phone, everything. I mean, their what? We paid them, and we had to actually. We had ethical committee that approved this experiment, and after 7 months, it took us 7 months to get approval. But in any case, we monitored all their activities, including asking them. We had a pop-up survey that was constantly. They had to reply to it constantly twice a day or 3 times a day?
Between 3 and 4 times.
Between 3 and 4 times a day. And so we have huge amount of data on the participant. I don't have the time to give all the data that to tell you about the data that we received, but what we can say a little bit is that, and this was actually shocking for us, most of the participants were not bothered at all to share their information. And I have here the diagram that's saying that more than 60% of them were actually willing to share their locations. It has not, I mean, this is another diagram saying that sharing location, showing sharing location according to the activities, but and of course, people were less likely to share their location when they were with friends, but in general, there was no objection to actually give all this information. What we also saw is a little bit a growing problem. This is not coming only from the quantitative finding, but also from the qualitative finding, is to actually define what it means today, public space. So for most of the people, it means, I mean, when we ask them, it has to do with the amount of people surrounding them. It has nothing to do with the values that we are attaching to public space. This is, again, bring a huge question, and this is what I was asking Professor Amitai Etzioni. Who is going to fight for this? I mean,
you.
And I will just say a few things about our findings. So we found correlation between the type of space and willing to provide information, but in general, people were willing to provide information in most places. There was no objection at all, not at all, but in, as I was saying, in most of the public spaces. In terms of qualitative findings, we find a difficulty, real difficulty, actually to define what is public space. Everyone were defining public space versus their private home. They were able to define privacy, but not at all public space. This is actually an argument I have with Professor Etzioni. I think that it's not at all, I agree that everything is public. I think that everything is now becoming privatized and controlled. I don't see the publicness. The data is public, but as a whole, we are talking about super controlled, privatized spaces, both in our private sphere, but also in the public sphere. So 3 main issues that came from this is that, of course, the erosion in the meaning of public-private space. I'm not sure that we can agree on the definition in this room. But the question whether it is important or not. I mean, maybe we have to give in and say we don't know what is private. We don't know what is public. I mean, the only thing we can do is actually think about the data collection and how to protect ourselves and forget about definitions. We also saw convergence between online and offline worlds. which also can create or enhance confusion. And also we found that people are actually accepting the lack of anonymity in urban space. If you think about it, there are not many places that you can actually feel anonymous anymore. So again, what does it mean about the public? Does it, I mean, are we all, again, as I was asking him again, who are we? Did we turn to docile bodies? I mean, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the text of Michel Foucault in the 70s, but he was saying that we are becoming more submissive in different subjects. And the question is whether this kind of project, Smart City, is actually normalizing our indifference towards privacy violation. I'm finishing in 2 minutes. So the whole argument of this paper is that the vertical horizontal control paradigm, well, the argument is that we cannot separate between the vertical and horizontal control paradigm. I mean, we both share information, contributing to this big data system, but at the same time, we are also part of this big experiment of data collection of the private sector and the public authorities. So in the name of public safety and horizontal sharing and in the name of democracy, we are actually contributing to the practice of normalizing practices of control, exposure of personal data by individual, and this all resulting in the diminishing of privacy. In that sense, what I'm trying to argue is that this is our fault. I mean, we're part of it. And this is definitely and particularly evident in public spaces. And the question is, again, do we or can we protect ourselves in public space? Thank you.
תודה רבה.